Hello and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. Now, I've shown you a lot about the way music is timed. I haven't shown you everything, of course. It can get very complicated, but it's very mathematical. But I've gone through the fact that, generally speaking, a quarter note has one beat. So what are the various ways that you can write music to have one beat? Well, a quarter note is probably the most. So if we look at this chart over here, I wrote this. This is not a song. I just put some things on paper so I could show you as a teaching tool. I put the time signature as 1/4. Now, I've never seen 1/4, but I'm not saying it's never been done before. It would mean you have one beat to a measure, just one beat, and the quarter note gets one beat. So the reason that I put it up, the quarter note gets one beat because of that 4 that's right there. So the reason I put it up is I want to show you the various ways that you can put notes together to make one beat. So it's not really that hard. The quarter note is one beat. 2/8 notes are one beat. Now, there are various ways of writing the 8th note. You can write it down with the stem and the flag. When you get a line like this, that's the stem. And when you get lines across, those are flags. So you can do the 8th note, 2 of them. You could do it down here with the flag, or this is the stem and the flag, or you can combine them together with one line connecting them. That's still considered to be a flag. And when that happens, you have both notes that are 8th notes. I put a group of them in there, but 2/8 notes is going to equal a quarter note, and a quarter note is one beat. 4/16 notes is going to be one beat. You can write it. It's like an 8th note that's stuck in that is split in half. And where you have 2/8 notes to a beat, if you split 1/8 note and get 2/16, split the other 8th notes and get 2/16, you get 4/16. This equals one beat. Now with the 16th note, you have 2 flags. Here's the body of the note. Here's the stem. These are the 2 flags, body of the note, stem, and these are the 2 flags. Or you can join them together. There are 2 lines joining 2 notes together. Those are considered to be a double flag, and so therefore those are 16th notes. Now, triplets is when you have 3 notes to a beat. And you always know that it's going to be 3 notes to a beat because when it's written, it's going to be like 3/8 notes. But instead of 1 and 2 and, or whatever you count them, it has a little 3 on the top. And therefore, you know, it's technically a triplet, and you have 3 beats to the 3 notes to the beat. Or it may have a little curve, you know, kind of like a little curve with a 3 underneath it, or maybe even the 3 on top. It means the same thing. Those 3 notes are equivalent to one beat. Now, what if you have 6/8 time? Well, 6/8 time, the 8th note gets one beat. This is something that I've gone over a little bit, but probably not enough. We do 3/4, 4/4. That's the usual time we use, but 6/8 time is very much like waltz tempo. You get 6 beats to a measure, and an 8th note gets one beat. Because there's an 8th there, it's not a 4, it's an 8th, so the 8th note gets one beat. So that means if the 8th note has one beat, here's an 8th note, 1 flag, 1 stem, 1 flag, and that's going to be one beat. So a quarter note is going to be twice as much, so that quarter note is going to be 2 beats. And a dotted quarter is going to be 3 beats, because if the quarter note is 2 beats and the dot is equivalent to 1/2 of what the value of the note is, that's going to add another 8th note to it, and an 8th note is worth 1 beat. You're going to end up with 3 beats to this measure. So that is something to keep in mind, that you need to pay attention to the time signature of the song, because the time signature is going to tell you how many beats there are to a measure, and what kind of a note gets one beat. For 4/4 time, it's usually, and I don't even know, I've got 2/2 time here, but I haven't written in 4/4, but 4/4 I've shown you quite a bit. It would be 4 beats to a measure, and a quarter note, which is significant, that 4 stands for the quarter note, that gets one beat. What if you have 2/2 time? I have seen hymns and so forth written in 2/2 time. Well, it means there are 2 beats to the measure, but a half a note, which is 2 beats, normally a half a note is going to get 1 beat. So therefore, you would have this one, it's a half note, normally 2 beats, but because it's 2/2 time, that 2 means the half note gets 1 beat. So this is 1 beat. And that means that the full whole note is actually 2 beats, because it's the equivalent of 2 half notes, which are, instead of the usual 2 beats, only 1 beat. So this whole note's going to be 2 beats. So as you can see, I don't want to make this too complicated for you, but if you just think in terms of what the signature, the time signature really means, like I showed you 9/4 time, and 9/4 time is when 9 beats to the measure, but it's still the 4th note or the quarter note is worth 1 beat. But when you get something like 2/2 time, then you're going to have 2 beats actually becoming 1 beat. The half note, which normally would be 2 beats, is now 1 beat, because this says that the half note is equivalent to 1 beat. So this is 1 beat, and this is 2 beats. And I could go on and on with this. For 6/8 time, the 8th note is 1 beat, because it's the 8th note here that is equivalent to the 1 beat, which means the quarter note is going to be 2 beats, which means the dotted quarter is going to be 3 beats. Remember, 4/16 is going to equal a beat. 3 in terms of a triplet is going to equal a beat. And you can write it different ways. I just wrote these down to show you the different ways it can be written. Here is the 16th note, the body of the note, the stem, and the 2 flags. Because the note is a high note, the stem goes down on the left, and then the flags are to the right. If the note is a lower note, the stem goes up on the right, and the flags go to the right. It's just easier to read that way. And if you have 2 or 3 notes, it could be a bunch of them, like this one. As long as it has those 2 lines across, it's considered that both of these are 16th notes, because you have the 2 stems, and these lines connecting them are also considered to be flags. So therefore, you have 2 of them. That's considered to be 16th notes, 2 16th notes, tied together, but 2 16th notes nonetheless. And then this is a dotted 8th and 16th. That is always 1 beat. Dotted 8th and 16th. If you were to take the 8th note and you were to cut it in half, you would get 2 16ths. If you would add a dot to that, that would add another 16th to it, because half of it would be a 16th. So this would be 3 16ths if you were to write it out that way. And then your 4th 16th is right here, where you have this note that has 2 lines to it. This is a little flag. It doesn't go all across. So that's not a 16th. That's a dotted 8th. Here's the body of the note, the stem, and that line going across is considered to be a flag. That makes that a dotted 8th, because that line is the flag. And an 8th note, as you know, has 1 flag. And the 16th note has 2 flags. So you just take that and you add a partial line. This makes that 2 flags, and this makes this a 16th note. So if you were to split this up, you could get 3 16ths out of this, and you get 1 16th out of that, and that's the same equivalent as if you have this group of 16th notes here, except you take these 3 16ths and you play them as 1 note, and that leaves the last 16th equivalent to this right here. I hope this makes sense. I don't want it to be confusing to you, but reading notes is important. And when you play that 1/16th, if you can't remember how the notes can get split up, don't worry about it. Just remember, with triplets, it's 3 to a beat. With a dotted 8th and 16th, that's one whole beat. And for 16ths like this, written out just together like that, that's another one beat. 4/16ths, 3 triplets, a dotted 8th and 16th, and a quarter note, or 2/8 notes, all equal, respectively, one beat. It all equals one beat. So now that I've probably messed you up forever, I'll take this down. But it's easy, you know, I thought of this last night. It really is important to understand this, because when you're reading music, you don't have time, if you're sight reading, you don't have time to figure it out. It's just there. And so I'm going to put this down. Now, last night, if I have what I want to up here, this is a song I wrote last night at about 10 o'clock. Before I went to bed. A song just came to me and I just wrote it out. Now, the interesting thing about this is I've written this song with triplets and dotted 8ths and 16ths all the way through it, just triplets and dotted 8ths, 16ths. So I'm going to try to remember it and play it the way I intended it to as I was writing it at 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock is not always the best time to write music, but if it comes to you, and I'm going to tell you this, if you are thinking about nothing or you're just, you know, lounging around or whatever, and a song comes to you, and you don't recognize it as a song that you've heard before, you should attempt to write it down, because it may be your own song that your brain has created. A lot of people who are creative people, they get their most creative moments when they're not trying to work on something. When you're trying to work on something, or you're trying to create a song, or you're trying to write a poem, or you're trying to get reading done, or whatever it is you're trying to do, your mind is totally focused on that task at hand. But if you just want to lounge around and you're not paying too much attention, you're just relaxing, it's like the mind goes on its own trip. And then it thinks of things. This is the way the structure of the atom was discovered. A scientist was thinking about something else. He had been trying to figure out the structure of an atom for a long period of time. He hadn't gotten anywhere. And when he relaxed, he kind of dozed off and had a dream, and there it was right in front of him. His brain had worked it all out for him. He woke up and he wrote it all down and he had it. But when he had it, his creative moment was not when he was focusing on trying to get something done. He was focused just to relax, and then all of a sudden it came. So at 10 o'clock, I'm going to play this slow, but it is all triplets and dotted 8ths and 16ths. I do have a half note in here, and I do have a quarter note in here. There's a couple of quarter notes, but basically it's all triplets or dotted 8ths and 16ths, which is what we've been talking about. And you notice for all of the triplets, I've written that 3 on top, so you know that they're triplets. If I hadn't done that, you would have no way of knowing that it's a triplet, and you might try to play it as a regular 8th note, but at 8th note, you need 2 to equal a quarter, but with triplets, you get 3 that equal a quarter. So if I'm going to kind of work this out with you, this is going to be one beat. It's in 4/4 time. That means 4 beats to a measure, and a quarter note gets 1 beat. Well, the triplet is like a quarter note. You have 3 notes, but it's equivalent to 1 beat. You fit the 3 notes in 1 beat. The dotted 8th and 16th is 1 beat. There's another triplet here, and that's 1 beat, and then you have your quarter, and that's the 4th beat. So you can write music like that. So what I decided to do is write music with triplets, with dotted 8ths and 16ths, and it won't be the best song you've ever heard in your life, but it will teach you that you can write music like that. So I'm going to take it slow, and if you can follow along the music and see what I'm doing. So there's a whole song. It's not long, but it's a whole song, and it's based almost completely on triplets and dotted eighths and sixteenths. So let me play it again. I'll do it a little slower, I think, just so you can follow along. And remember, the 3 means triplets, 3 notes to a beat, the dotted eighth and the sixteenths, 1 beat. So it has a kind of, this note is like 3 times longer than that note, but it's still it fits within 1 beat. And you'll notice when I think of it, notice that I do the slanted line when I'm writing it, instead of writing it, instead of putting the flags right straight across, I like to slant them a little. And the reason is if you're using black ink, you can get these lines, if they're straight, mixed up with the staff lines, so that it looks like something might be an eighth note when it's not. So in order to kind of not have that confusion, when you write your eighths or whatever it is that you're writing, write your flag slanted. For the most part, you can't always do it. You can't do it with quarter notes. But if you do that, I mean with eighth notes, you can't always do it. But if you have a group of notes and you can do it on a slant, then you won't get this slant line, which shows a triplet, mixed up with the lines of the staff, which are the same color. That's the reason I do that. And I think a lot of musicians do the same thing. So let me play this again. Now, what I like to do at the end of a song is I like to slow it down. I didn't write a retard in there, which I could have, and but I didn't do it there. But that's typical for most songs. They're going to slow down. They're going to get softer. Either that or they're going to get louder and slower at the same time. So there you have it. Triplet, dotted eighth, sixteenth. Triplet, quarter, that's 1 beat. Triplet, dotted eighth, and sixteenth, and a half note. For this business here, this is an F natural, which is accidental because Fs are supposed to be sharp, but I wanted the natural, put that as a natural, but to get it back to a sharp again, since this natural goes for a full measure, I have to sharp that again. That makes that another accidental. So you get just on that last line, I'm going to play that last line. Now look at the fingerings, if we can here. D, E, D, G, F, and then switch it and put this finger down and this finger up, and you've got your F sharp. You don't want to put this down because you're going to get an E. And then, since I have it on the F sharp, then the next note here is going to be a D. I keep all the fingers down. This is the F sharp, the last note in this measure. And since I have the fingers down, to get the D, all I have to do is put 2 fingers down. These 2 fingers, that brings me from the F sharp to the D. I don't have to change this at all. I don't have to lift it up and put it back down because it's a different note. It's already being used, and it's going to continue to be used. So G, F sharp, D. So that means I don't have my fingers flapping all over the place when I'm playing this G. None of that. It makes the playing much smoother. I think also, let's see, this section here, B, C, C sharp, D. Now, if you look, this is the way the recorder does it. B, C, F sharp. I'm sorry, C sharp. Just those two fingers, but you notice I have my right finger down, so that's going to help support it, and it's not going to change the pitch. And I've kept my fourth finger down, and that balances the instrument. The other way I would normally do it with a flute, I would go. This would be a saxophone and flute kind of combination, the B and the C. The saxophone C sharp is going to be lift that off. So you don't have anything, but your mouth and this finger is going to be used for balance, and also your thumb in the back. And then when you play the D, I already have this finger down on this D, for this D, C sharp. Then put these four fingers down. This one, this one, this one, this one. Keep this one up. Keep the tone hole covered, which is also a balancing thing, and then you get your C sharp. So, you know, there are a ton of things. I write a lot of music, but I write the music not because I'm going to ever be a Chopin or Beethoven or anything like that, but just to show you how you can play, how you can finger, how you can make it very nice. And so this came to me, it just came to me out of the blue. So at 10 o'clock I thought to myself, I better write it down. If you get a song in your mind, write it down while you can, because if you don't, you're not going to remember it. It's going to slip away and you're not going to be able to reclaim it. I've heard more musicians tell me that. Gosh, I had just this wonderful song this morning. I wish I could remember it. Write it down while you still have it. It'll stick around for a while. That means you have to have paper ready to write with, and a pen ready to write with, or a pen or a pencil. And then if you can figure in your mind what the fingerings would be, you don't even have to have an instrument to write it, but you'd have to have an instrument to check it, to make sure that you wrote it the way that you wanted it to be. And then you might have to tweak it a little. So that is a song based on triplets and dotted eighths and sixteenths with an occasional quarter or a half note thrown in. So these patterns of timing can be used a lot for writing music or playing music that's already written, because most of the time we're playing music that's already written. I play my own arrangements for most things because I don't have anyone else to arrange my music. I want to arrange it the way I want it because I know I want it. I know what the instruments can do. I know what I want it to sound like. I know what the arrangers are. And so therefore, I'm probably the best person to write my own music. And I find a lot of musicians now are writing their own music. And the reason that they're doing it, one, I think copyright law is difficult to handle, plus they're creative, and they have a musical bent, and they have songs flowing through their mind, and they need to have a way to write them down, preserve them, and to play them for other people. So I'm going to close it here. We're just about out of time. We'll be continuing with the different intervals that I have songs written for all of the intervals, starting with the thirds, fourths, fifths, and working up to the octave. So we'll get back to that. But every so often I need to take a break and show you something that comes to my mind that I think is important. Any questions for me, just email me here at the studio. I'll answer your questions on the air. So I'll close it here. Please join me next time.